guys, it's Reagan and welcome to the start of another reading vlog. This reading vlog I'm very excited about because I'm going to be tackling two recently released and very popular fantasy releases. So I'm going to be reading and reviewing them both and letting you guys know if they're worth the hype, worth the pickup or not. So I recently filmed my mid-year book freak out tag, and in it I realized I have not been doing a very good job of staying on reading recently released fantasy novels. So I decided to kind of throw my TBR out the window and check out two books I have picked up recently and two books that I feel like I've seen all over the internet. I'm looking forward to reading them both, and I'm also just looking forward to sharing and seeing what you guys think about these books too. But without further ado, let's chat about the TBR. So first is The Heartless Hunter, which centers a witch and a witch hunter. And to basically hide in plain sight, our main character, who is a witch, begins to like court the most well-known witch hunter, which sounds dramatic to say the least. And then we also have A Fate Inked in Blood, which is a Norse mythology centered fantasy story. I believe both of these have a pretty decent romantic subplot line, and that like romance is definitely part of the book. But I'm also hoping that the fantasy is also great and entertaining, and all of these things are kind of like a seamless reading experience. I'm hoping for like River Enchanted vibes, not in like plot, but in style, in terms of the balance between romance and fantasy versus like Fourth Wing. You know what I mean? So, but only one way to find out. I'm gonna read both of these hopefully this week, and I'll keep you guys posted. It is currently after 5 on Tuesday, so I'm gonna settle in and start dinner here in a second. We're grilling tonight. I got some shrimp to put on the Barbie, which I am looking forward to. And I think I want to start that new Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders documentary. It looks interesting. And I used to watch the show in middle school or high school on CMT, so I'm curious to see like how aspects of it are going to change. But anyway, I'm really excited about this video. I'm excited about these books. I'm excited to get a lot of reading in this week, and it should be a good time. So let's get to it. It's grill time. I definitely didn't understand how much shrimp I was buying, so we got shrimp for days around here. Shrimp. And we got some skewers. I'm gonna definitely have shrimp for lunch tomorrow. And then I'm making some rice, which I'm just gonna toss with some butter and some lemon. Call it a day. But this will be together in a snack, which we love. Oh wait, I also made, pause, this yogurt, dill, lemon sauce too to top everything up with. So should be tasty. I love summer grilling. Careful, I might turn into a Blackstone channel if I can just, you know, get over using a Blackstone when it's like 100 degrees outside. But I could be making pancakes all the time if I had the right equipment. Grill master. Hello, good evening. Apologies for the lack of check-ins. I was just watching Summer House with Clay. We're officially now caught up. No more Summer House to watch. Very sad indeed, but lucky for me, I have lots of books I plan to read. I've decided I think I'm gonna start with The Heartless Hunter. Because this book has like over a 4 rating with like 60,000 reviews. So I'm just like going in with like medium to high expectations. I also just love this witch dating a witch hunter. Seems dangerous, seems complicated, and I'm curious to read more. So, or learn more, because I haven't even read one page, but I'm gonna read this now. So good night. Hello, good morning. I got my hair refreshed this morning, so we're looking very bright and bold. But I owe y'all a reading update. I also need to do more reading. First, we're gonna make lunch. Lucky for me, it's easy because we have so many leftovers from last night. So I'm just gonna like heat everything up and mix it together, and it should be quite delicious. So I'm going to do that. I am gonna chop up some fresh vegetables though, and then call it a day. But this should be 10 out of 10. Perfect little leftover stir fry situation. And I still have my yogurt sauce to top it off with. Hello, let's do a reading update that desperately needs to be done. I have read 60 pages of Heartless Hunter, and I have to admit, I'm reading it quickly. I'm generally entertained. I wouldn't say so far that this book I feel like is gonna blow my mind, but in terms of like reading it and enjoying it, so far I can definitely earnestly say I am. The setting, the characters, the setup is definitely fun, but has a level of intensity that I do feel like is gonna capture my attention. But let's take a step back and chat about what this book is about. So this book is set in a world that kind of gives like fantasy meets Russian Revolution vibes. There was once a regime of witches, and we don't have a lot of clarity yet where I'm at in this book about exactly how this regime worked, but I definitely think it was a situation of probably a lot of corruption. So there was a revolution, overthrew this witch-centered government. As a result of this though, any type of witch-related activity is completely outlawed. So now there are individuals called witch hunters. As you can imagine, with any type of policy that's black and white, you know, maybe the witches, some of the witches were bad, doesn't mean all witches therefore deserve to die. It's complicated. So that's sort of the situation we're in. It gives like 1800s, turn of the century, like we're going to the opera. People are wearing gowns and slippers and riding horses. In the book itself, we're introduced to our two main characters, Rune and Gideon. One is a witch, one is a witch hunter. Rune is a product of this revolution. Her grandmother was captured and killed, and she herself has been living in hiding ever since, hiding her magic, but she also works as something as the Crimson Moth, which basically works to ferry witches to safety out of this town and kingdom before they're caught by the witch hunters that live in and around this area. To keep her cover, Rune sort of plays the part as sort of a airhead, bubbly heiress who, you know, doesn't really concern themselves with politics, doesn't really get involved with things, so you know, people don't kind of look at her too closely or take her too seriously. Gideon, our other main character, is a witch hunter who appears to have a bit of a murky past in terms of his motivations. He doesn't seem to enjoy his work, but he is a witch hunter. Both of these characters kind of come to the same conclusion, that they need to court the other person, which is kind of an interesting setup. Rune decides that she's going to court Gideon to kind of enforce her cover further, because obviously why would the Crimson Moth be married to a witch hunter? Not to mention the proximity to a prominent witch hunter will give her information to be able to better do her job and those types of things, versus Gideon is interested in courting Rune due to some evidence that has come to life to make him think that she might know something to do with the Crimson Moth, and by getting close to her he might, you know, get closer to his arch nemesis, who is the Crimson Moth, but obviously he doesn't know that that is actually Rune. So we have two people interested in sort of courting the other person, but for their own means and gains, not because they're actually interested in the other person, but like obviously at the same time, this clearly feels like this is going to be an enemies to lovers situation. And I feel like we sort of rapidly got through the intro and kind of the means to an end to get these two people to begin this sort of fake courtship, because I imagine it's going to be rather entertaining. But at the same time though, I do feel like the author has spent a good amount of time sort of explaining the different spells, the magical components, the history of this place, which I find interesting. So we'll see. I'm hoping there's still this sort of balance struck between fantasy and romance, which is definitely brewing, but I hope it's paced out, drawn out, and we get a lot of the world and the magic too. So I'm gonna sit down and read more, but I wanted to do an update because I have read 60 pages. And so far so good. So cheers to that. Hello, let's do a reading update. I've read another 60 pages. Let's chat about this book. So I have since found out, since starting, that this book is actually YA fantasy. And I feel like that's actually given me some really good context for reading this, because it does definitely read like YA fantasy. But I can't deny that like I'm reading it really quickly. I would almost akin this to like a CW show. Like the setup and the initial beginning of this book, super rushed. Like we're kind of just told kind of the setting, the vibe, our main characters, their BFFs and siblings, like who we should know and care about, and then we're sort of jumped into the story. Like there wasn't a lot of like natural buildup for explaining who, what, where, and why. And some of the writing is like a little straightforward. I wouldn't describe it as like a writing style that's like something to write home about, but it reads quickly, and I can very clearly like see what's happening and experience the story as it's happening. And like, it's not amazing, but it's also, I think, successful in what it's trying to achieve in a way. So I'm reading it quickly and like I'm curious to know what's going to happen next. But let's talk about some more specific things. So obviously I've already touched on Rune and Gideon, this sort of witch hunter situation and this society that's post-revolution, with the witches being overthrown and now witches are being hunted. Rune and Gideon definitely have a very fun back and forth almost immediately. Could you say the whole setup of this sort of fake courting thing is rushed? Yes. Could you say that the reasoning for both of these characters deciding that the only solution to their problems is to court one another is a little nonsensical? Sure. But I also cannot deny that it's not a fun trope and situation to see play out. So like I can kind of look past that. In a similar vein, I feel like Rune and Gideon are introduced to us pretty smoothly. Particularly, I find Rune to be a very like fun and endearing YA heroine to root for, and the chemistry between Rune and Gideon is definitely there, and the pacing, I feel like the relationship aspect has started quickly, like the courting aspect, but so far I feel like their back and forth has been fun. Something else I wanted to call out are there are side characters. We have Rune's BFF, her name is Verity. She's like a scientist academic, and we also have Alex, who is Rune's childhood best friend and also happens to be Gideon's brother. Both Alex and Verity know that Rune is a witch, so she has like confidants in her secret, but Alex obviously really loves his brother too, and he feels very torn about this like new courting situation, and I also think he very clearly has feelings for Rune, so possibly a love triangle in the making here. A very classic setup. Again, these characters right now feel flimsy isn't necessarily the right word. They were kind of just thrown at us, and they're filling a very specific role within the story. It's like objectively there are flaws in the structure of this, but like also I'm having a decently good time and I'm reading it quickly, so I almost like, it's not that I don't care about those things, because I objectively do and I definitely want to call them out, but knowing this is YA too, I think helps, because I was thinking, I'm like, wow, you know, it doesn't really read like adult fantasy, particularly adult romantasy, and it kind of reminds me that I like YA romantasy because it's kind of more like lighthearted in its non-seriousness, which I appreciate. Like the story is serious, but the structures are maybe a little less intense, so you can kind of jump right into a story and focus on the character dynamics quickly, which also makes the reading experience also very quick. But yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, this is definitely a flawed book. The beginning was definitely rushed, but I do like the characters. I really like the setting. I think it's clever. And I find the plot to be competent enough where I'm like curious to see what's going to happen next. Sure, there are some plot holes for like the origin of things, but for the most part, I'm like pretty entertained. And I guess, again, how I akin it to a CW show, I feel like it's like a good way to describe this. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes I watch Vampire Diaries and I'm like, that doesn't make sense. But did I have a good time watching Vampire Diaries? Also, yes. Like, two things can be true at once here, you know? And, I'm gonna keep reading. Oh, good morning. It is the next day. Apologies for the late start on the vlog. I am about to start making lunch. I'm starving, but I wanted to do a reading update because I am past the 50% mark of the Heartless Hunter, and I'm liking this book, and I don't even, like, objectively, I feel like I should be disliking this more based on the problems I'm having with it, but for some reason, I'm still just like, la 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 la, like flipping the pages, having a good time. Like, literally, objectively, the background character relationships are so flimsy. The love triangle that's been created, flimsy, okay? It is really not well developed. Aspects of the magic system have been revealed to us. Similarly, I wouldn't even say it's super well developed, but I'm still having a nice time. So like, I don't really know how that's gonna shake out. I feel like probably like a 3-star read. I think going into this book is all about expectations and what you're trying to get out of the reading experience, because there's flaws, but also the little dynamic between Gideon and Rune is so fun to read. I also love that they're both like, I love the scenario where they're both courting the other person for like their own means. They kind of have this like strategy and a little bit of guilt that they're tricking the other person, but then obviously they begin to sort of catch feelings for the other person too. But the fact that it's both of them doing that, it's just fun, and seeing them like strategize, and obviously Gideon is trying to catch the Crimson Moth and Rune is the Crimson Moth, so they're constantly having these sort of like run-ins with each other where Rune knows but Gideon doesn't know, so there's like an element of dramatic irony. It's just like fun, and you know, sometimes that's all you need in life is a fun good time, and that's what I feel like the Crimson Moth is delivering to me at the moment. So we're gonna keep going, but first I'm gonna make lunch. Another day, another snack plate. My main job, my main form of occupation is just making sure Matilda has enough pets throughout the day. and that she's comfortable in her chair. In other news, it is time for coffee. Will I have an existential crisis? That's not my business. So, you know, I'm not gonna worry about it. Let's do this thing. Reading update, I have about a little over 100 pages of this book left. The architecture of the plot is definitely starting to reveal itself. Like, we're definitely kind of moving into the final sequence. Things are getting more and more intense. I think everything that I've already been saying is definitely consistent. I will say the plot continues to be a little bit flimsy in the way that things are kind of happening with not a lot of depth. So I do feel like I'm sort of guessing where things are going, and I also feel like I've guessed an upcoming like major plot twist. That being said though, if this is the plot twist and where things could go, I'm assuming like later installments, it still would be interesting to watch unfold. So it's not necessarily bad that I've guessed, but I do feel like it's going to take away some of the surprise factor when I know it's inevitably going to happen. We've also learned more about the backgrounds of our two main characters. Gideon's past is very complicated, very dark, very hard, and you know, he also is able to sew beautiful clothing, which is a perk for any woman out there if you ask me. Yeah, their back and forth is fun, the secrets are fun, but I will say like kind of the structure and the direction of the plot hasn't really deviated much in terms of quality or expectations since the beginning of the book. I was hoping that there is a little bit of world building as relates to the magic system, which I find interesting kind of at the chapter head. I feel like a lot of the concepts of this book are good. Like, I like the world and setting, and I feel like the author does have a talent for like character interactions and like building chemistry between characters. I do feel like there's a lack of depth within the story and that a lot more could be done. I also find the writing style to be like very straightforward, and maybe if it was a little, I think I could maybe look past some of the lack of depth with plotting if I was maybe more amazed and like mesmerized by the writing style. But you know, as I've said before, it's giving CW energy. I am entertained. I've read this book quickly, and I do feel like I can see why people are fans of this. So anyway, I'm gonna put you up there. We're gonna do a little bit of a reading sprint together. I'm gonna try to finish this book this afternoon and then start book 2 for this vlog, which I feel like maybe I'll like more, but we'll see, TBD. Cheers. Hello. I finished my book, one book down, 400 pages read. We're happy with that. I'm gonna do like final thoughts and feelings and updates in a bit. I kind of want to process for a second, but I will say the end was rather explosive. But now I am going to marinate or start marinating tonight's dinner. Clay and I are making steak tacos. So I'm gonna marinate this and get it sorted for dinner. I love cooking tortillas. Something about it, mostly because I eat them pretty much as I cook them. So dinner is almost ready. I made some rice, some beans, and I just have to grill the steak. And dinner is served. Should be delicious. And now we're gonna go watch the Dallas Cowboys cheerleader documentary. This docuseries is oddly emotional. I wasn't expecting it. I obviously owe y'all an update. But for now, I'm gonna start book 2, which is A Fate Inked in Blood by Daniel L. Jensen. I'm excited about this because I do think this is another kind of hybrid fantasy romance novel, but I feel like it apparently has a really good balance of like fantasy plot lines centering mythology in particular, which I love mythology-centered stories. I'm excited to also encounter the writing style, so I have high hopes for this. So I'll keep y'all posted, but let's get reading. Pre-check-in, check-in. I haven't read much, but this book so far has really captured my attention, and also really puts into perspective the quality of writing of this book versus the last book I read. Like, the writing style of this is excellent, and also just so much better. Anyway, I gotta read. I'm so into this immediately. Hello everyone, good morning. I am here with a much needed reading update for both of these books because, as you might recall, I finished Heartless Hunter and I started A Fate Inked in Blood last night, and I've already read 100 pages. I have a lot of thoughts on this book. Basically, I'm quite obsessed so far, but let's wrap this book up first. So the thing with Heartless Hunter is I can't decide if I enjoyed this book because it was like fun or if the flaws of this book overshadowed the fun. Like, I can't say with my full chest that like I fully recommend this. I think it just depends on what you personally like to read, because this book has a lot of flaws, but there is a strength that it reads quickly and it's like relatively entertaining. It has some really fun trope usage, particularly the enemies to lovers. The setting and the magical concepts are cool, but again, the writing style, the plotting, the pacing, like everything left like a lot to be desired. But the author can write a hook, and the ending ultimately was quite explosive and definitely positioned the story to be more interesting in the future. I was right that I guessed the plot twists in this. I basically guessed all of them. But you know what? At the end of the day, like, it was still like relatively fun to read, but I also still can't say that this book was like excellent, and I highly recommend it for you to check out, especially because I've now started A Fate Inked in Blood, and just like the contrast and how I'm feeling while reading these books is like stark, and the quality contrast is also stark. But like, this was fun, like, you know, witches, witch hunter, that whole scenario, but like it wasn't anything to really write home about. But if you're looking for like an easy read and you're wanting some of these tropes and you want something that's going to be like, you know, check it out. But at the same time, I don't know how good it was. But let's talk about A Fate Inked in Blood, because the first 100 pages of this book has me hooked. I don't even know what I was expecting going into this. Maybe because I read The Heartless Hunter, I was kind of expecting a similar quality story going in, but this is knocking it out of the park for me so far. From a writing style point of view, excellent. I love the stylization of the story. I love the setting, the sort of Norse setting, Viking setting. Everything about it is just like totally sweeping me away. The characters, the concept, the dash of magic through like mythology, sort of the otherworldly quality that I feel like the style of this book has. And the other thing I will say about this book, there's this sort of like stylization gloss that I'm really appreciating. All of the characters read very human. They have flaws, you're rooting for them, you empathize with them, but this book also sort of has this tinge of reading like a myth tale. So everyone feels like a little extraordinary, but not in like a stereotypical chosen one-esque sort of way, but more in like a mythos kind of way, and it works so well. There's like a romantic back and forth in this, which kind of gives me also like fae vibes. They're not fae, but kind of the weirdness and sort of the god lean that you kind of get with fae stories is sort of playing out in this as well. But I am not even telling you what this book is about yet. So let's take a step back and talk about A Fate Inked in Blood. So in the story, we're introduced to our main character, Freya, and she lives again in this sort of Viking-esque world, and here gods exist. Here gods exist. And gods exist kind of in an indirect way. People pray to gods, people leave offering to gods, but also the blood of gods can exist within humans. And when this happens, these humans are sort of elevated kind of like in a demigod sort of way amongst humans. They tend to be leaders or great warriors, people that communities sort of really look up to. And also, if someone has a drop of blood from a god, they can be claimed by this god and also given powers that are like specific to this god. So fire powers, or like being really good at fishing, you get the idea. So at the beginning of the story, we're introduced to Freya, and she is currently in a terrible marriage. She hates her husband. She's in a small village, which she's never left. The thing with Freya is that you immediately get the sense that she is incredibly capable. She grew up in a household where she learned to fight. She's also been harboring a huge secret for most of her life. And she also is incredibly loyal and will do anything to kind of save and protect her family, which inevitably gets her in a very big pickle because she kind of catches the eye of a powerful earl in the area, and he basically sees her as a person who's going to fulfill this large prophecy, which allows him to basically take over all the land and unite all these villages. You get the idea. She finds herself now in sort of this political circus where she's trying to survive, and all of this is also centered around like the magic of gods, politicking, war and battle fame, like all of these things. Also alongside Freya, we're introduced to another character, Bjorn, I think is how you say his name, and he is the son of this earl, and he is an individual who also has a drop of blood from a god, gifting him like the power of fire, so he's like an exceptional warrior. These two characters are the main characters. They meet on page 1, and as I sort of hinted at, I feel like there's this gloss on the story. Like the writing style is so sumptuous, and their interactions are like so good from the beginning. It's not just like a chemistry thing, it has this like otherworldly quality to it, and I think it's because of this connection to like this god thing. It kind of reads like, you know, when you read fae stories, like fae are a little tricksy, they're very charismatic, they're a little weird, and it just like works so well. It has that energy, but instead of it being fae, again, it's like Norse mythology, and I love it. So again, because Freya is sort of attached to this prophecy, the Earl wants to protect her, so he assigns Bjorn to be like her bodyguard, but it's so much more complicated than that, and I really don't want to like spoil too much. I really only read the intro of this book, and there was a lot of intro. Like there's a lot of information to let us know about not just this prophecy, but giving us background on Freya's life before kind of being attached to this new like very dangerous political scenario. But I just have to say, I've eaten the whole thing up. I love the writing style. I love Freya as our main character. I love the setting. I love the concept. It's just sumptuous. And it just also, I think, reading this and then reading this, like the contrast was on another level. Because I picked this book up, like page 1, I was like, oh, like I was just like drawn in. The stylization is perfect, and I also just get the feeling that this book is going to be such a perfect blend of like fantasy, politics, magic, world building with a compelling romance as like a subplot line, in the same way that I feel when I read books like A River Enchanted. Like those books are like solid fantasy with also an amazing like character plot line, and I feel like this is going to deliver that. And based on how this is going, I need to read more books by Danielle Jensen, because I really am not trying to like oversell because I have so much of this book left, but like first 100 pages, I was like, I can't get enough of this. So clearly, you know, here we are. So needless to say, I am excited to keep reading this book today. I really feel like I'm gonna fly through this. It's just, it's so captivating, and like the characters and everything about it is like so good. And the fantasy part is working so well. The settings, like, I'm excited. Okay, anyway, I've read 100 pages. I've read 500 pages so far for this vlog. First fantasy book, take it or leave it. I think depends on your preference. Second fantasy book I've picked up though, so far incredibly promising, but I of course I'll keep you posted. Like the skill of this author, I'm reading an intense battle scene that is not just well constructed, but like my anxiety is up about it. Like there's so many things going on. Our main character Freya is kind of at the heart of this because people want to claim her for themselves because she's kind of like a key to power via the prophecy. And yet there is a scene that feels seamless. It doesn't feel disjointed. It doesn't pull me out of the story. That literally made me giggle. Between Freya and Bjorn, he's so over the top that it works so well. It's almost refreshing in a way that he's so aware of himself that he's just like, he's just living the vida loca, you know what I mean? He's not trying to be subtle. He's so over the top, and it's so good. And in contrast, like how Freya responds and reacts to him, it creates such good banter amidst this very intense battle scene I'm reading. I'm having a great time. Y'all already know what's happening today. Scrumptious, delectable, 10 out of 10, the most beautiful thing that's ever been made. My hyperfixation sandwich. And a bag of chips, which, you know, is also equally important. Jalapeno chips are my preferred, but I also like a regular chip. So anyway, hope your day is going as well as mine, because I'm now gonna go eat this. Could not be happier about it. Hello. I've read a lot. We need to do a reading update. I can't put this book down. It's so entertaining. So let's go through all of the pieces of this book. So first and foremost, obviously we're following Freya. Freya is at the center of this prophecy. Her life is turned upside down. She leaves from one terrible husband and is forced to marry this other guy who wants to use her so he can claim his destiny and power through using her. Also, this puts her in a precarious situation because one, the new place in which she resides, not many people like her, particularly the Earl's current wife. But also everyone that is surrounding the Earl, or the Jarl, has no interest in her being alive or having that Jarl have her so he can claim his destiny. They either want to capture her for themselves or kill her to prevent this destiny from being fulfilled. So the plot has had a lot of action. There's been lots of combat, lots of fight scenes. Our character is kind of going on a quest and journey to like stay alive and also get to necessary spots to sort of continue her own fate. But also a lot is hinted like she is fateless, so aspects of her fate isn't necessarily written in stone. And as we all know, if an oracle gives a prophecy, if Percy Jackson's taught me anything, it's not so straightforward, you know? Until things play out, it's not necessarily obvious how things are going to go. So all that to say is the plot is really intriguing and it's paced quite quickly. We're moving to a lot of different locations, but everything feels not just logical, but thoughtfully done, and nothing also feels flimsy or rushed. It's really setting the stage for things of what's going on. Picking this book up, I didn't anticipate that the romance was going to be so centered stage in this book, and I definitely don't mind it. And I would also say the romantic pacing and tension is great. The pacing in particular, again, nothing feels too rushed, but the chemistry between the two characters. Here's the thing, Bjorn as a character is great. It is often you pick up a romantasy book and you have like big, strong warrior, main protagonist dude. You run into this a lot. He is not a unique character. But I feel like this is one of the best versions of that character I have read in a long time. In particular, I feel like in romantasy, I'm forced to read so much cheesy dialogue, one-liners from these guys, and they just like can't really pull it off, and it just like makes me cringe or roll my eyes. But Bjorn is pulling it off. He is saying outrageous things that are hilarious. The back and forth between our two main characters is great. There's also a bit of a forbidden situation kind of between them and tension because she's quite literally married to his father, who he hates and has been like removed from for many, many years. She obviously doesn't want to be married to this dude at all. It's not her fault. She's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place here. But nevertheless, that exists. And their camaraderie is interesting because he's basically forced to have to protect her. So he's training her, they're traveling together, and there's just lots of banter and back and forth, you know? Meaning, all's to say, this has just been so entertaining to read. Like the action, the different locations, the infusion of mythology I also feel like has also been so well done. I love books that use like mythos as part of their storyline. I love gods in general in terms of them included in fantasy plot lines. They're sort of unfeeling, distant hand that like is, you know, impacting everyone's lives, but they're sort of so far removed that there's like a callousness as to how gods function within the world, and I always appreciate how that's explored within fantasy stories. That's definitely happening here, particularly with Freya. Like she is supposed to have this great, magnificent fate, but she's really just been used and placed in situations her entire life, first by her family, now by other people who are in power. She's been moved around, and she's like a very capable person, but still there's only so much that's within her control, and that's definitely a part of this book too. The writing style has been good. Everything, like I'm having just a really good time reading this book, which is why I'm like halfway through it. I was expecting to enjoy this, but I guess I just didn't have a full perspective on the overall vibe of this. It's definitely not like intense high fantasy by any means, but it's more like historical, god-based, kind of a dash of fantasy where it makes sense, but kind of in that historical Viking setting. It's great. I love it. I love quests. What's a girl to do? I'm gonna go read more, but I needed to give you an update before I like read the whole thing and never checked in. So there's that. To over page 200 of my book, but Matilda and I are taking a much needed Love Island USA intermission. Ramen. Love Island USA, and everyone was right. I asked if this season was worth watching, and so many people said yes. You're 100% right. Love Island USA season 6 has been so entertaining so far. Hello, I watched so much more Love Island than I ever anticipated, ever planned. Love Island USA is so good this season. There's just so much drama. I'm so into it. But, I also want to say I'm really into A Fate Inked in Blood as well. This book is also, I think I like knew it was romantasy or there was romance in this book going into it. But also somehow, some way, I'm also surprised about how steamy this book is. I'm not mad about it by any means. And I actually find the character dynamics between the characters fantastic. And the tension and the drama. I really like all the Norse mythology stuff. I'm not gonna say like every aspect of this plot is like a home run. There's a couple different things that are being queued up in terms of mysteries about what's going to happen in the nature of the prophecy. Also different power players and who they're actually aligned with and how people are maneuvering and manipulating other people. I feel like I've parsed out some of these plot elements. Not all, but some. And I could be wrong, but I think I have parsed out some, but I'm definitely gonna be able to finish this book tomorrow. I'm on page 240 and this book is 414 pages, so shouldn't be a problem. Good morning, everyone. It's time for some coffee. I'm gonna sit down and read. I actually think I'm just gonna like fully focus and finish my book this morning. I want to give you all a reading update first though. But I basically have like 150 pages left, which I feel like no problem. We're in the home stretch anyway, so let's see what happens together. But I do want to do a reading update first because I have thoughts. I have thoughts. Alrighty, so after further evaluation, I actually only have like 100 pages of this book left. So I'm 3/4 of the way done, and I have some thoughts and feelings about this story. So I would say the beginning of this book shook me, hooked me. It was like such a good balance of things. I loved the writing style. I loved the setting. I felt like there was really good world building. I loved learning about this sort of one drop of blood and the connection to gods and how that kind of translated to powers and this sort of prophecy that's surrounding our main character. All of the different character work, not only between Bjorn and Freya, which was great, but also some of the complex just interactions and stressful interactions between her and other characters. I just felt like the book was really whole in all of its different components, balancing romance and fantasy well. Moving into the middle part of the book, I do think things have gotten a little bit weaker. I think as the romance has throttled up and there has been a lot of like steamy scenes, which I don't know why I wasn't necessarily anticipating like how much romance was in this book, but there's a lot of steamy scenes, which isn't bad. And if that is like a main draw for you for stories, like you'll probably like this, because I still think, relatively speaking to other romanticities I've read, I'm still liking this more than a lot of them. But I think with the increase in steamy scenes, there's kind of been a decrease in some of the other aspects of the story that I've liked, like world building. And while the plot is definitely moving forward and there's still a lot of action, I feel like we've kind of lost some of the scenes between characters that I think would have really made this story more robust. We've been introduced to some side characters whom I've really liked, but I feel like the connection between characters feels like we're really close, but we haven't really gotten enough of those scenes to see them actually form that bond. You could almost say the same between Bjorn and Freya. I like both of them individually, and I believe their chemistry and how they're drawn to one another, but I do think they could have benefited from having like a few more actual conversations. If it's going to be in the direction I imagine it's going to be, which is, I love you. I just feel like there has been a little bit of quality decline from the beginning, which like, I don't know, it was so intense, the writing style, I was just like so transported, and I just felt like it was such a strong opening, and I just felt visually, I could like see everything that was happening. It was just so good. I just feel like we've lost some of that in the second half. There's still action, I'm still into the plot, but I just feel like we've maybe sacrificed for steamy scenes, which might not bother you, but I think if we removed like one or two of them, we'd still be left with some, which would progress the plot and their relationship forward, and the angst and this sort of forced proximity, forbidden love situation that's playing out. but we could have had more space for other things, which I actually feel like would have made the steamy scenes more impactful. But you know, that's just my opinion. That's just little old me's opinion. You know, what do I know? But anyway, I have 100 pages of this book left. We're definitely kind of in the final progression of the plot, and I'm curious to see how this is going to end, because I don't know, I feel like the author is gonna play with me a little bit, so we're just gonna see. Again, I like the battle scenes. Oh, something else I will say, there's a lot of training and combat training, but I wish there was more exploration on how the magic from the gods actually works. Like, I feel like this book could have benefited with our main character like trying to learn and understand like how her gift functions more and how can it be applied in more situations. And I feel like given that they're going into battle and, you know, fighting, that would have been something that would have been top of mind for everyone because it could benefit everyone. But I feel like it was kind of touched on, and her training in combat makes sense, but I feel like there should have been more exploration of her like God-given powers. Just saying. I'm not gonna lie, the back half of this book has been a little absurd. Which I'm a little disappointed about because I've been liking the book. I just feel like it went from like a logical book with like multiple things going for it at the same time to like only smut, basically, and no plot. Where I also feel like how much is going on kind of takes away from the impact of what's happening between the two characters even. I'm just kind of like, okay, all right. Anyway, I'm almost done. So we'll see if the ending we'll see how I square out with the ending. TBD. Guys, I finished A Fate Inked in Blood. And honestly, this book gave me absolute whiplash. Like, I'm almost scared of having to rewatch and edit this video because like I don't even know what happened. Actually, I do know what happened, and I'm gonna rant for a little bit about it. It's honestly tragic to report that the first half of this book I was obsessed with. I would have given this book 5 out of 5 stars if the whole thing tracked like the first 50%, but then like something happened where priority of the story transformed and became messy, unbalanced, repetitive, annoying, everything that made the first part of this so good. The chemistry, the pacing, the plotting, the magic. It's almost like thrown to the wayside so the author could just like focus on steamy scenes, which just honestly like infuriated me like as I continued to read along. This book had so much potential. I was so into so much of this book, and I'll honestly annoyingly probably read book 2 because the plot twist at the end was interesting enough to capture my attention, but I just feel like this whole thing was squandered. But let's talk more about it. The second half of this book had very little growth in plot. It became almost circular. It was super repetitive. And again, it was all really for the basis of getting our two main characters who have all this angst and tension to like be with one another. Plot twists and the red herrings were so obvious that I literally thought that I must have just misunderstood, and by the end, like things would really become clear to me. And even one of the plot twists like fundamentally does not make sense from a stature point of view. I mean, I really cannot believe that that could even occur in anyone's brain. But I think the part that frustrated me as well is that there was this rushing of the relationship between our two main characters. There was a real self-awareness in the first half of the book that our main characters had this like kind of lustful longing for one another, but this was accelerated in the second half of the book to be love. But the author never actually gave us any scenes where these two characters got to know fundamentally more about each other, scenes that you could see kind of the growth of care and like deeper feelings outside of that like initial reaction, which we got at the beginning of book 1, which made it hard for me to believe their motivations fully. I also feel like the second half of this book had some serious nonsense decisions that were being made in such a frustrating capacity. And it's like, I know, guys, I know. I was singing the praises of this book, and I stand by my feelings of the first half. Like, it wasn't about the plot, it was about the characters being together. And so like the plot sequence was like drawn out in the second half, and then we got to the plot twist at the end just so we could have as many steamy scenes as possible. But it just completely lowered the overall quality of the story because nothing else was really happening in betwixt those scenes, and also just made our characters feel silly because they were making decisions that were like transparently absurd in the moment of their existing. They had all of this like caution and concern, and then would make the most ridiculous decisions that realistically I feel like their characters would not make at all. So I don't even know what to say. 5-star read in the beginning, 1.5-star read, 2-star read at the end. How does that net out? I'm not totally sure yet. I need to continue to process. I feel like if you love romantasy, like if you love Fourth Wing or if you love ACOTAR, you probably will really like this book. For me, I really crave balance within my fantasy romance stories, and this lacked balance quite a bit, particularly in the second half. But I had such high hopes based on my experience with the first half. But I did complete it, and that was 400 pages read. I also completed, again, Heartless Hunter, which for all of its faults, I feel like the story was a lot more consistent from beginning to end. It didn't have this sort of weird switch up halfway through. I feel like what you read in the beginning is what you got in the middle and the end, and like, while it wasn't perfect, it was consistent, and for that I can appreciate it a little bit relative to this sort of whiplash scenario. But anyway, those are my thoughts and feelings on 2 very popular new fantasy romance releases. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm so curious about your thoughts and feelings below. Please let me know, because I gotta know. I gotta talk about these books in the comments. But I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you soon with another one soon. Goodbye!